He controlled matches across almost all of Europe. He was called a financial genius. Entire governments borrowed money from him, and then he was found dead in a Paris hotel room. This is the real story of Ivar Kreuger, the man who built one of the largest business empires in Europe in the early 20th century and lost it all in just a few months. Ivar Kreuger was born on March 2, 1880, in the Swedish city of Kalmar, into a family of engineers and entrepreneurs. His father owned a match factory, and from an early age, Kreuger was surrounded by production, accounting, and debt. He studied engineering at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm and later continued his education in Germany and the United States. Kreuger was not just a businessman. He combined the mindset of an engineer with the instincts of a banker. In the early 20th century, matches were a strategic commodity. In a world without lighters, without widespread electricity, matches were everywhere. In every home, every army, every factory. Tens of billions of matches were consumed globally every year. For daily life, matches were as essential then as electricity or mobile communication is today. Kreuger quickly realized this was the perfect product for monopoly control. After World War I, Europe was financially devastated. National budgets were in ruins, inflation was destroying currencies, and governments were drowning in debt. Many countries had little or no access to international credit markets. For some governments, even a few $1 million meant survival. That was the moment Kreuger stepped in with exactly what they needed: fast money, with no political conditions. His model was revolutionary. Kreuger offered governments long-term loans, ranging from a few million to tens of millions of dollars, in exchange for exclusive rights to produce and sell matches within their borders. To put this in perspective, a $30 million loan in the 1920s equals roughly $500 million today. That is the scale of modern national infrastructure financing. In effect, Kreuger was doing what international financial institutions do today, but alone and with his own capital. These were not simple business deals. They were state-level contracts approved by governments and parliaments. This is how the Swedish match empire was born. By the late 1920s, Kreuger controlled the match industry in more than 30 countries, including Sweden, Germany, France, Poland, the Netherlands, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, the Baltic states, and parts of Latin America. In modern terms, this would be like a single private company controlling the majority of lighter or battery production across dozens of countries at once. Poland alone received loans worth approximately $32 million. Today, several billion. France received more than $75 million, roughly equivalent to a private individual financing a major European government ministry today. Germany received tens of millions through various arrangements. In total, Kreuger's government loans exceeded $300 million at the time, around $4 to $5 billion in today's money. Effectively, one man was acting as a private creditor to half a continent. At the peak of his power, Ivar Kreuger controlled between 60 and 70% of the global match market. That means 6 or 7 out of every 10 matches lit anywhere in the world came from companies he controlled. The total assets of his empire were valued at around $1 billion in the early 1930s, more than $15 billion today. By scale, his business resembled a modern global industrial conglomerate or consumer goods giant. He controlled hundreds of factories, banks, patents, investment vehicles, and a complex network of holding companies in Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and the United States. Kreuger's personal fortune was estimated at roughly $200 to $300 million at its peak. In modern terms, that places him firmly among today's multi-billionaires. However, most of his wealth was not cash. It was tied up in shares, bonds, and credit instruments, making him extremely vulnerable to market panic. He became known as the Match King of Europe. He had direct access to finance ministers, prime ministers, and central banks. Governments did not treat him as a businessman, but as a financial partner. In terms of influence, his position was comparable to the role large investment funds or global financial institutions play in government decision-making today. But the foundation of his empire was fragile. Kreuger's system depended on a constant inflow of new money. New loans paid old obligations. Rising asset values maintained confidence. Confidence enabled even larger borrowing. Technically, this was not a classic Ponzi scheme. The factories existed, production was real, matches were sold. But debt grew faster than operating cash flow. The entire structure depended on uninterrupted credit. His financial reporting was extraordinarily complex. Some profits were overstated, certain assets optimistically valued, and internal transfers between companies disguised real losses. By modern accounting standards, the structure would be considered extremely high risk. But in the 1920s, reputation mattered more than transparency. Investors trusted the name, not the numbers. That trust collapsed after 1929. The Great Depression shattered global markets. Banks stopped lending without guarantees. Investors demanded transparency. Governments began revisiting monopoly agreements. The share prices of Kreuger's companies collapsed. Within months, his empire lost tens of millions of dollars in liquidity, sums that would equal hundreds of millions today. By 1931 to 1932, it became clear that Kreuger could no longer keep up. Creditors demanded repayment. New loans disappeared. Some financial documents were revealed to be falsified or manipulated. That was enough. The market lost confidence completely. In March 1932, Kreuger was in Paris negotiating with banks, trying to raise capital, fighting to retain control. But the scale of the crisis had grown beyond the power of even the most influential individual. On March 12, 1932, he was found dead in his hotel room. The official verdict, suicide by firearm. He was 52 years old. After his death, the collapse was total. Companies were liquidated or taken over by creditors. Assets were sold at fractions of their value. Investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars, equivalent to several billion today. Thousands of ordinary people lost their life savings. For Europe, it was a shock. The man who had financed governments could not save his own system. Ivar Kreuger was not simply a fraud. He was the architect of a financial structure so large and complex that it depended entirely on stability, cheap credit, confidence, and a predictable world. And the world of the 1930s was none of those things. He did not lose to competitors. He lost to history.